She had cried her eyes out. Her eyes felt swollen as she sat across from the speaking cop. She wasn't listening, but he must have assured them that his team was doing their best. They had to find their son and daughter. Time passed until early evening, and all she could think about was wondering how she could do this to them. Elsa and Petrobor Parker were good people and just wanted to give back when they decided to adopt their second child. In this way, they could increase their family and help someone who was less fortunate. Approaching their mid-30s and getting married in their 20s, they saw the right time to adopt. It was not foreseeable what all this would lead to in the future. It took a lot of research into adoption agencies before they found one they trusted in Ethiopia. Elsa and Petrobor already had their first child, who was 8 years old at the time. Keegan desperately wanted a sibling to take care of. It wasn't long before the family found the next addition to the family. They had found their special someone and were overjoyed, but their happiness wouldn't last forever. Her name was Mary. That summer, she was welcomed with open arms by the Parker family. She was a beautiful jewel, precious and receptive, and everything one could ask for in a daughter. Being 5 years old when they brought her in meant she and Keegan clicked straight away. Elsa and Petrobor watched and thought it was cute, but couldn't imagine what this seemingly harmless dynamic would lead to. Keegan and Mary did everything together, seemingly stuck together with glue. In exchange for him teaching her English, Mary showed Keegan how to play the games she knew from Ethiopia. He protected her like any big brother would. As they got older and stronger, their bond became stronger. The uniqueness of their bond would go unnoticed until it was too late. Mary came from Addis Ababa and had a heartbreaking background. Her father had never been there, and her mother had died giving birth. Having never seen her parents, Mary grew up with her aunt. However, her aunt had more to offer. Her story was sad. Mary, aged 70, has been living with HIV/AIDS for over a decade. In addition, she was not in the best of circumstances financially and struggled to raise her niece, despite all the love she had for her. Unfortunately, things were about to get worse. Pexels, Shashank Kumwat Murray's aunt, did her best to take care of her and give her the best possible life, even though she was ill. However, as Mary got older, she eventually had to choose between Mary and her medication. She chose Mary, but soon worried about who would take care of her once she was gone. As her condition worsened, she began calling an adoption agency, desperate for an answer to her prayers. They eventually were, but the repercussion would destroy family years in the future. 16 years later, Mary was a third-year student at a prestigious Midwestern college on her way to earning an actuarial degree. That morning, her mother woke up with a heartbreaking letter and decided to call the police. Pexels, Emma Basso also has been made aware of many cases where adopted children stole money from their parents' bank accounts before running away, as well as cases where children have been involved in horrific acts with family members. Even after being made aware of this, Elsa trusted that Mary would never be like those other children, but this letter told her otherwise. Dear Mother, the letter began very simply, explaining why Mary was not at the table, as was her habit every weekday, before going to class. I've thought a lot about my country of birth, the letter continued. I received a message from an Ethiopian family member on Instagram. My aunt, who we thought was dead, is still alive. She just passed away. Elsa gasped, her eyes filling with tears as she read on. The rest of the letter would make her reach for her phone. From the rest of the letter, Elsa learned that Mary and Keegan were on their way to the airport and had booked a flight to Addis Ababa. Alarmed, the mother screamed for her husband, who came running. She tossed him the letter, got her phone, and called her kids while Petrobor called the police. The parents spent the morning trying out Mary and Keegan's phones. Elsa knew that Keegan would always stand by Mary no matter what. Though she should be relieved that he was by her side to protect her, she couldn't face the idea of them flying around the world alone. Police flocked to the Parkers' home and asked all relevant questions before embarking on their investigation. Petrobor was already halfway into town, phoning every airline he knew that went to Ethiopia. He would find his children if it was the last thing he did. Alone with a police investigator, Elsa lost herself in her thoughts. She couldn't believe her daughter could do this to them. She sat across from the officer, stunned with swollen eyes. How could life be so cruel? A few hours passed, during which the police promised to do whatever they could to find Mary and Keegan. Petrobor had called too, assuring a distraught Elsa that he was checking the airport for her children. Elsa curled up on the couch. Her children were the best thing in her life, her family the only thing she lived for. She pictured them outside of her ever-watchful gaze and broke down even more. God had given her the best children a parent could ask for. Why should he take them away from her? The day had turned into a boring evening when Petropa returned. Elsa didn't even look at him. But then she heard a familiar voice, a girl who called her Mama like her Mary always did. She turned and saw her children smiling next to her husband and couldn't help but rush to hug them. They cried in each other's arms, where Mary revealed to her that halfway to the airport, Keegan had convinced her to go to her favorite baseball park where she cooled off. She apologized for letting her emotions get the better of her. Although she would later travel to Ethiopia to visit her aunt's grave, she would do so in the company of the Parkers, her family and all. Disclaimer: in order to protect the privacy of those depicted, some names, locations, and identifiers have been changed and are the product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual events, locations, or persons living or dead is purely coincidental.